Tonight, on First at 9 this Sunday, the 3rd of August 2025. Flexible reforms. Government ready to amend the proposed education reforms based on public feedback, the Prime Minister assures. Announces plans to restructure the higher education system. Youth outrage. Youth activists continue to accuse the government of politicizing youth associations. Tensions flare at several district youth conferences. Security and sovereignty. SJB legislator Mujibur Rahman claims the large Israeli diaspora in Arugambe poses a threat to national security. Sarvajana Balaya leader MP Dilith Jaivira meanwhile claims government has once again launched a manhunt against war heroes as the UN Human Rights Council session approaches. Not so sweet. Sugarcane farmers troubled by the delay in harvest purchase. Unions blame the government's tax regime for distorting the sugar and ethanol markets.
This is Derana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world, brought to you by the only Sri Lankan media network to rise to the pinnacle across all media platforms, recognized as the best by every survey and beloved by the people. Now on your top story tonight, Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya says the government is ready to amend the proposed education reforms based on feedback from stakeholders including parents, teachers and education officials, highlighting that the reforms are not only an initiative of the government but also a program of national importance. During a recent tour of the Northern Province, the Premier also asserted that in future Sri Lanka state universities will primarily focus on research while the responsibility of awarding professional degrees will be delegated to vocational training institutions.
An awareness program on the proposed education reforms for education officials of the Northern Province was held yesterday at the Northern Province Chief Secretariat's auditorium with the participation of Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya.
Everybody can't work in the big Jaffna schools. Northern Province has 13 zones. Every zone is important. Equity starts with that. In fact, more attention has to be given to the areas that are disadvantaged. This is not Harani Amarasuriya's reform. This is not Anura Kumara Disanayaka's reform. This is Sri Lanka's education reforms. So all of us have to have a say in it. We're doing it in stages because if we waited for everything to be ready to start, we can wait for another 10 years. So we were starting small, with constantly seeking your feedback, and we will adjust and we will change. We are flexible, but we have a vision and we have a commitment that this must change for the better for all of our children. I am confident that you also want this change. Parents must understand what we are doing. Teachers must understand what we are doing. As officials, you need to understand what we are doing, and we all need to work together. Give us your suggestions and your ideas. Tell us how to make this better.
The Prime Minister also inaugurated the newly constructed library at the University of Vaunia. Following a tour of inspection and a conversation with undergraduates, the Premier participated in a discussion with the faculty.
We have expanded our university system during the last several years, but we haven't focused enough on quality so that we ensure that the students who leave our universities are ready to face the world with confidence. So for the next few years, this is what we really want to do to ensure that we become not just undergraduate teaching universities, but postgraduate teaching universities and also centers of excellence in research. The way we are approaching higher education is that we are not looking to expand, but we are looking to invest in quality improvement. We really want to change this mindset in our country where all of us tell our children basically that they only have two career options. Either you become a doctor or you become an engineer. Maybe you can become a lawyer, and if you're a woman, maybe you can do teaching. But the country needs many more professions to take us to the next level. We want the 17 state universities to really focus on academic work and research and let the the professional degrees go through vocational training. If students don't have proper facilities, can we blame them for the resentment they have towards us? Not only ragging, violence on campus, harassment is becoming a big issue. We need to stop this. ශිෂ්‍යයන්ට මම කියන්නේ ragging වලට කිසිම සමාවක් අපේ ආණ්ඩුවෙන් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. හරි zero tolerance. ප්‍රචණ්ඩත්වයටත් නැහැ. මම කියන්නේ විරෝධතා දක්වන්න එපා කියන එක නෙවෙයි. දේශපාලනිකව ඕගොල්ලොන්ට තියෙන අයිතීන් සියල්ලම රකින්න. නමුත් ප්‍රචණ්ඩත්වයට ragging වලට නම් කිසිම සමාවක් අපි දෙන්නේ නැහැ.
Crunchy goodness for hunger on the go.
Now, tensions flared today during the elections of youth society conferences of several districts when youth activists accused the government of politicizing youth associations and influencing the elections. However, addressing the accusations, NPP parliamentarian Dinesh Hemantha asserts that the ruling party's intervention in youth associations is not an attempt at politicizing but of nurturing the country's young leaders.
Several protests were launched across the country opposing the government's alleged politicization of youth society conferences. In such a context, the Anuradhapura District Youth Society Conference was held today at the Anuradhapura Youth Centre. Tensions arose when a former official of the Anuradhapura District Youth Society Conference expressed critical views regarding the current situation.
This time, our youth society conference has become politicized. As former officials, when we arrived here, we saw the vehicles of local government councillors parked all along the street. The youth societies were established through their intervention. That was not how it happened before. They appoint so-called volunteer officers and attract youth through the National People's Power. Now these societies comprise of individuals who have joined because of the NPP agenda.
Meanwhile, tensions also arose at the election of the Kalutara District Youth Society Conference held earlier today. Prior to the commencement of the conference, former Vice President of the Beruwala Youth Federation, Purna Satyajit Alhakun, spoke to the media alleging that the election had been politicized. Tension sparked when a group of National People's Power supporters who were present nearby intervened. Amid the chaotic situation, the Kalutara South Police took former Vice President of the Beruwala Youth Federation, Purna Satyajit Alhakun, into custody. In the meantime, the election of the Matale District Youth Society Conference took place yesterday at the Matale District Secretariat's auditorium. The ballot was carried out amid protests by several former officials of the youth conference, accusing the government of using social media to influence the election. Afterwards, the former officials staged a walkout.
Even rural youth societies have become politicized. WhatsApp groups have been created through which a group remaining outside the auditorium were exerting pressure on those within on whom they should vote for. The event compare also called out the use of phones during the election. We have video evidence. They influenced the youth to vote for a specific candidate. A significant injustice happened to the youth of Matale. We walked out of the session due to the interference of politicians.
However, NPP parliamentarian Dinesh Hemantha, who participated the conference, addressed the ongoing allegations against the government.
The allegation levelled by various parties is that the government is attempting to politicize youth clubs. We clearly do not have an intention to do so. However, as a people's government, we will take care of these green shoots until they grow up enough to serve the country.
Now, the crisis persisting within the sugar industry continues to trouble farmers and other stakeholders within the sugar industry, with sugar stocks continuing to remain unsold 4 months after its harvest. The Farmer Struggle movement pins the blame on the value-added tax, which renders brown sugar more expensive than white sugar. Vimal Wattuheva, the national organizer of the Farmer Struggle movement, claims that the crisis brewing in the sugarcane industry impacts around 200,000 people in Monaragala alone.
Financial pressures continue to crush sugarcane farmers across several areas whose harvests remain unsold despite grievances aired in this regard. As the weight of this persisting issue continues to rise, sugarcane farmers recently held demonstrations in front of the Sevenagala sugar factory, claiming that the authorities have ceased to purchase sugarcane stocks. As tensions continues to simmer, the troubled sugarcane farmers of Monaragala claim that the government's tax legislation has distorted the market for sugar and ethanol, causing the impending crisis within the industry.
4 months have passed since we reaped our sugarcane harvests. However, we have not received any payments thus far. Furthermore, seeds and fertilizer required for the next harvest have not been distributed properly. This is the time we usually fertilize the crops. However, we have no fertilizer. The usual practice is to prepare our plots of land for sugarcane cultivation by this time of the year. But none of that is happening at the moment. Last Friday, Minister Sunil Hadunnethi addressed the District Coordinating Committee meeting and urged farmers to hang on for another 3 weeks. He says by then the government will be able to sell off the remaining stock of ethanol. However, the crux of this issue is the lack of a plan by the government to sell sugar. According to the tax regime in place, the government has levied a value-added tax against brown sugar. White sugar, on the contrary, remains exempt from the tax. Therefore, white sugar is now priced at 220 rupees, while brown sugar is priced at 260 or 280 rupees. As a result, demand for brown sugar dwindles. That is the most salient reason behind the impending issue. On the other hand, the government has issued permits for the production of ethanol from maize. However, there is no strategy to sell ethanol either. Therefore, the government needs to revise its plans and amend its tax legislation such that a kilo of sugar would be priced at 200 rupees, while a litre of ethanol could be priced at 800 rupees. Within Monaragala alone, about 25,000 families directly rely on this industry. About 10,000 labourers are also connected to the trade. In aggregate, this issue impacts about 200,000 people.
Apico Next Gen. Make the leap to faster sleep.
හොඳම ෆෝන් එකක් ගන්න. ළඟම අපාන්ස් එකට යන්න.
Samaga Janabalawege MP Mujibur Rahman voiced concern that Arugambe has effectively become an Israeli enclave. Addressing the media in Colombo today, he warns that the government's continued silence on the matter poses a serious threat to the country's security and national sovereignty.
The
government recently declared that it will grant visa-free entry to citizens of 40 countries, including Israel. However, when in opposition, the very same leadership vocally supported the Palestinians and actively opposed the Israelis. Now, having assumed power, they have not only waived visa fees for Israeli nationals, but also extended protection to Israeli establishments within the country. Not only that, but they have also enabled Israeli entrepreneurs to establish businesses in areas such as Arugambe. Through such initiatives, the Israelis have been able to establish their presence within the country. Even tourists from other nations, when on a tour to Arugambe, have realized that the place has already become an Israeli enclave. However, those in charge of tourism, defense and broader governance appear bewildered, incapable of recognizing the broader implications of these decisions. Ironically, ministers once at the forefront of pro-Palestinian demonstrations, such as Vijay Herath, who once protested outside the US Embassy, now remain silent. This accommodation of Israeli interests as well as the Mossad operatives poses a significant concern to the national security of the country. It raises serious questions about the impact on national sovereignty and the country's long-term security.
Now, meanwhile, leader of the Sarva Janabale, MP Dilip Jayavira, alleges that a systematic campaign is underway to target the country's war heroes in anticipation of the upcoming UN Human Rights Council session in Geneva. Speaking at a public meeting in Mirigama, Jayavira claims that the alleged campaign also includes efforts to discredit former Navy Commander Admiral Nishant Ulugetan, describing it as part of a broader political conspiracy.
The inauguration of the Sarvajana Balaya head office in Mirigama electorate and the establishment of the Sarvajana Sabha in the Hapidagama division took place this morning under the patronage of party leader MP Dilip Jayavira.
In the lead up to the polls, we assured that we would never oppose everything the government does like the JVP did in the past. Every single day I spent in parliament, I wanted to stand up and congratulate the government on a job well done. Unfortunately though, the government hasn't done a single thing to deserve such praise. Gotabe Rajapaksa genuinely did what the incumbent government attempts to do deceitfully. He formed a committee to oversee appointments to state institutions. Through that committee, capable, deserving individuals individuals were appointed. Unfortunately, he was sent home due to the interference of certain members of his family, such as his nephew. However, what is the incumbent government doing at the moment? They are handing out positions to their university colleagues and close allies. Are these appointments based on qualifications? No, absolutely not. Former commander of the Sri Lankan Navy, Admiral Nishantha Ulugatanna, a decorated war veteran, was remanded recently. What was the reason behind this? He had been arrested over the disappearance of a youth from Potuhara during his tenure as the Director of Naval Intelligence. Why were these legal proceedings initiated? It is because the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva is around the corner. That's why there is this sudden drama. I've heard that the CID is after more former Navy commanders as well. Enough is enough. This has to stop. The entitlements of former presidents have been slashed. If anyone lived in unreasonable luxury at the expense of the public, then it should be rectified. But this blanket removal of entitlements, especially targeting former President Mahinda Rajapaksa, is wrong. Yes, he made mistakes, like anyone. But let's not forget he ended a war that lasted 30 years. That's not something you can brush aside. Everyone is aware that the former president is not doing well at the moment. So why is the government after him now? If you want to criticize him for decisions made out of greed, go ahead. But don't ignore the service he rendered this country. The Mahinda Rajapaksa I know, and I know him well, has never done anything to bring shame upon this nation. Therefore, we will not stand by and accept this targeted, unfair treatment.
එනිසා මේ දේශ ද්‍රෝහී අර්ථයෙන් එතුමාට කරන කෙනෙහිලිකම් අපි අගය කරන්නේ නැහැ.
Welcome back. Now in more local news, Minister of Trade, Commerce and Food Security and Cooperative Development, Vasantha Samarasinghe asserts that his party does not support the notion of pursuing politics as a means of personal livelihood. Responding to a recent social media post by former JVP parliamentarian Nandana Gunatilaka, the minister remarks that former MPs who have relied solely on politics for income may seek compensation through appropriate welfare schemes rather than expecting a pension.
The government's proposal to abolish parliamentary pensions ignited widespread public debate, drawing both support and criticism. Amid the controversy, former Member of Parliament and ex-presidential candidate of the Janatha Vimukthi Peramuna, Nandana Gunatilaka, issued a stark warning via post on his official Facebook page. In his statement, Gunatilaka reflected on his past, stating that he had taken up arms before leaving school and had never held conventional employment. Instead, he devoted his entire life to full-time politics. He revealed that his only source of income is the 68,000 rupee parliamentary pension he currently receives. Meanwhile, Minister of Trade, Commerce, Food Security and Cooperative Development, Vasantha Samarasinghe, addressed the issue during a media briefing.
If someone has made politics their sole source of income that represents a political culture we moved away from long ago. There is no need for anyone to turn to violence in this country. And if there are individuals genuinely struggling to meet their basic needs in the event pensions are abolished, assistance can be provided through programs like Aswasuma.
As Sri Lanka charts its course towards economic prosperity, innovation is hailed a key avenue of success and a means through which Sri Lanka can assert its identity on a rapidly evolving global stage. To further those national ambitions, several Sri Lankan innovators showcased their cutting-edge inventions primarily in the fields of biomedicine and technology at Trace City, Colombo. The inventions, which spanned from AI-powered drug discovery to Ayurvedic devices, were inspected by Dr. Bandula Vijay, a global leader in the biomedical innovation sphere.
Young Sri Lankan innovators gathered at Trace Sri Lanka to showcase their cutting-edge innovations to Dr. Bandula Vijay, a luminary in biomedical innovation globally. A range of ideas and inventions spanning from AI-powered drug discovery to Ayurvedic devices, highlighting the potential of Sri Lankan innovations. Speaking to Ada Derana, Dr. Bandula Vijay expressed optimism on the progress of Sri Lankan innovations.
We have to become a country of innovators. Now imagine that today somebody develops a potential product of 20 years from now, and we came out in the market with that. Before long, the rest of the world will get to know this was done in Sri Lanka by a young person, 22 years old. A year or two later, we came up with another idea. The word gets around, that second idea also came from Sri Lanka. The world will get to know that if you need to get a new idea, new product, they have to come to Sri Lanka. So we have to do a few things and prove our point. That's what we have to do. And get a name built, establish our name or brand ourselves as a nation that is able to come up with new solutions, new innovations, and that will help humanity, solve the problems of humanity, right?
Trace Sri Lanka, a not-for-profit private sector initiative, continues to foster a collaborative environment for innovation and entrepreneurship. By bringing together industry leaders, academia and government, it aims to strengthen the national innovation ecosystem and inspire the next generation of problem solvers. Vice President and Executive President Heminda Jayavira and Senior Vice President Dr. Sankalpa Gambarige of Trace Sri Lanka highlighted ongoing efforts to strengthen Sri Lanka's innovation ecosystem by connecting government, academia and industry. They emphasized the importance of fostering youth creativity and entrepreneurship to drive sustainable, multidisciplinary innovation and national economic growth.
Trace is technologically reawakening a culture of excellence. So we have started about 11 years ago. A group of tech entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka wanted to create a collaborative space to develop innovations, entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka. So what we are trying to do is to connect the whole Sri Lankan innovation ecosystem and make sure that we could build something bigger than what we have been doing all this time. Today what happened was actually we have identified many missing pieces in Sri Lankan innovation ecosystem. It is kind of eye-opener for all these startups to get this amazing experience in biotechnology, biomedical area. In Sri Lanka, we have to look at that whole engine works together. There should be an outside entity who should do that. So we are, as a not-for-profit private sector organization, we are trying to bring all these three together, which is the government, academia and the industry. So that's what we are trying to do.
The whole idea of building Trace is to foster national economic growth through capturing our general public, especially our youth, creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship abilities, because we thought that's the only way we can create wealth where we would be able to create our own Sri Lankan mark on the map in terms of innovation, creativity to make this mark. So we found our people, they have the talent, but I think there was something missing in this equation. Should we get the infrastructure first and then ask people to move, or get people to move and get infrastructure next? Infrastructure is both soft and hard infrastructure, including policies and frameworks. So what we thought is the innovation happens at the periphery of the problem when multidisciplinary people meet together, they figure it out problem, and innovation should be in a sustainable manner. So sustainable innovation is all about entrepreneurship.
In 2020, Sri Lanka allocated only 0.12% of its GDP, around 18.17 billion rupees, for research and development. Of the 18.17 billion, the highest gross expenditure on research and development was incurred by business enterprises, recorded at 37.94%. Government research institutes trailered behind, claiming 34.12% of the gross expenditure on research and development. Most of this funding went towards applied research, with smaller portions allocated for basic research and experimental development. Focus areas included engineering and technology, agricultural and natural sciences, highlighting a priority on practical, sector-based innovation. Despite having over 6,000 researchers engaged in R&D, only 2,267 were full-time. Compared to the global average of 1.19% of GDP, Sri Lanka's R&D investment remains low.
Innovation will be Sri Lanka's pathway to earning a vital foreign exchange and build a resilient economy. The need to create space for new ideas, support local startups, attract research investments, and streamline regulations is pivotal. Real transformation begins in classrooms, with educational reforms that spark curiosity, creativity, and problem solving to drive innovation and global competitiveness.
The proposed education reforms in Sri Lanka have sparked impassioned public discourse on the progress of Sri Lankan education. Since education is at the epicenter of economic development, it is imperative for the government's reform proposals to foster and encompass creativity, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills alongside strong communication and the ability to collaborate. These skills, which often remain outside school curricula, are crucial for Sri Lanka's journey towards economic resilience through innovation.
Now in your business news, Sri Lanka has attracted over 200,000 tourists in July 2025, marking a 6.6% increase from the same period last year. According to the latest data released by the Tourism Development Authority, 18.5% of visitors who arrived in July were from India, while 11.7% were from the United Kingdom and 7.8% were from the Netherlands. The July arrivals take the number of visitors to arrive in Sri Lanka in the first 7 months of this year to over 1.3 million, as the island nation chips away at its target of attracting 3 million tourists by the end of the year. India was the top source market for tourists, with over 200,000 tourists arriving so far in the year. Significant numbers of tourists also arrived from the United Kingdom, Russia, Germany and China. Welcome back. Now in your world news, Russo-Ukrainian tensions continue to escalate amid a hike in drone attacks and corruption crackdowns. A Ukrainian drone strike sparked a massive oil depot fire near Sochi, while Russia pounded Ukrainian cities in return. Meanwhile, Ukraine battles a major defense corruption scandal. Amid the fallout of the war, Russia was also rocked by an eruption of a volcano for the first time in 500 years.
A Ukrainian drone strike has ignited a major fire at an oil depot near Sochi, a popular Russian Black Sea resort. Debris from the drone hit a fuel tank, sparking a blaze battled by over 120 firefighters. Sochi airport suspended flights and similar attacks were reported across southern Russia, injuring at least 4. Russia's defense ministry claims to have intercepted 93 Ukrainian drones overnight. Meanwhile, a Russian missile strike on Mykolaiv, Ukraine, injured at least 7 civilians. Ukraine says 61 of 83 Russian drones and missiles were shot down. Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies have uncovered a large bribery scheme involving inflated drones and electric warfare system contracts. A Ukrainian MP, National Guard members and local officials were arrested. President Zelensky reaffirmed a zero-tolerance policy on corruption and restored the independence of key anti-corruption agencies after public backlash. The move was welcomed by EU allies and Ukrainian intelligence chief Kirilo Budanov. Meanwhile, the Krasheninnikov volcano in Russia's far east erupted for the first time in 600 years, possibly triggered by last week's powerful earthquake. The eruption follows seismic activity that also activated the nearby Kilichovskoye volcano. Experts say the quake and subsequent volcanic activity are linked, raising concerns over ongoing geological instability in the Kamchatka Peninsula.
Now, India will continue to buy oil from Russia despite US President Donald Trump's threat of additional penalties on top of the 25% tariff on Indian goods. This comes despite Trump's assurance that India would no longer be buying Russian oil.
On top of a new 25% tariff on India's exports to the US, President Donald Trump indicated in a Truth Social post last month that India would face additional penalties for purchases of Russian arms and oil. On Friday, Trump told reporters he had heard that India would no longer be buying oil from Russia. However, 2 Indian government sources not wishing to be identified due to the sensitivity of the matter had told Reuters yesterday that India will keep purchasing oil from Russia despite Trump's threats of penalties. One of the sources is quoted as saying, "These are long-term oil contracts. It is not so simple to just stop buying overnight." The New York Times also quoted 2 unnamed senior Indian officials yesterday as saying there had been no change in Indian government policy. During a regular press briefing on Friday, External Affairs Ministry spokesperson Randir Jaiswal said India has a steady and time-tested partnership with Russia.
The sourcing of our energy needs, we are guided by what is available in the markets and by prevailing global circumstances.
Russia is the leading supplier to India, the world's 3rd largest oil importer and consumer, accounting for about 35% of its overall supplies. India imported about 1.75 million barrels per day of Russian oil from January to June this year, up to 1% from a year ago.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.